The next panel is the Industrial Water Energy Nexus. And the question we are proposing is, are we on the right path? It's sponsored by ICOM and Magis Industry, and will be moderated by Mr. Jonathan Presley, ICOM's market sector leader for the drinking water business for Americas. He has 25 years of experience in the water industry and has developed innovative approaches to solving water treatment challenges. Mr. Presley has a passion for drinking water, I presume that desalination too, water system and protecting public health. He was working across the United States, South America, Middle East, Africa, Southeast Asia, Australia, and Europe, leading the high-profile projects solving water challenges ranging from contaminant removal to resolving water scarcity. Jonathan?
Okay, well, thank you for that fabulous introduction, Miguel. I barely recognized it. And thank you for the stalwarts here in the audience that have made it through to our afternoon session. We're excited and passionate about this subject in the industrial water sector. So today's panel, we're going to address sustainability and are we on the right path? So we have a fabulous, diverse panel here with a tremendous broad range of experience. So let me go through and introduce our panelists for you. First, to my left here is Mr. Thamer Al-Mutari. He is the president of Saudi Arabia Water Environment Association, and he also works for Saudi Aramco. He has a passion for water, and I know he's developed some innovative solutions around reuse, and also is addressing alternative water supplies. He is a chemical engineer with degrees from King Fahd University and also from the University of Texas. Thank you. Welcome. Next on my panel is Dr. Hugh Fleming, also a chemical engineer with a long history in water treatment. I've known Hugh for many years from his days at Xenon, developing innovative technologies, then through to being the global water leader for Hatch, and then currently he is the water strategy lead for Anglo-American Mining. So delighted to have Hugh here. Next, I have Mr. Ahmed Al-Mazuri, the CEO of Matis, a utilities company. You're an electrical engineer, I found out, so breaking our row of chemical engineers here in the audience. You're a water solutions provider, and you have a long history in the energy sector too. So you're going to address our questions today from a utilities perspective. And at the end of our section here is Mr. Devesh Sharma. Devesh is the Managing Director for Aquatech's international business. Aquatech is a technology provider addressing the water needs for industrial users. He is a chemical engineer also, and also has an executive MBA from INSEAD. Welcome, panelists, to our session this afternoon. Yeah. Well, first question I'd like to ask our panelists is your water stress issues, your water needs, and how you're approaching sustainability from the various vantage points you have in your companies, and how you're approaching the water challenges that each organization is facing. Please, if you could just give a little background as an introduction to our session.
As you know, water challenge is an issue, especially for GCC countries, is very essential. We living in a very severe water scarcity nation. Water as a sustainable source for industrial business, for manufacturing, for research institute is very important, very essential. It is unlikely to find any organization that can sustain their operation without water. So the water sustainable or water issues putting more pressure in the management in order to identify the proper way to sustain their operation. In oil and gas business, we identified certain way to sustain our projects or operation through water sustainability assessment prior to project initiation. Also, if you identify the proper source of the water, you have to identify did you implement the optimization of the water in your project? So these two assessments is very essential to each project in order to ensure the survival of the industrial operation.
I'll speak to the mining industry and the view on sustainability. You may be aware that with respect to water, mining is, I think it's the #4 consumer among sectors, following municipal water, following power, and following agriculture. Mining is the largest consumer of water in the world. And so it's absolutely key to mining. It's particularly key because, for two reasons. One, miners need water for processing. And secondly, because miners tend to be the largest entity in the areas they are in. They're typically remote locations, of course, and so they're typically very much competitive with the regional environments in terms of water usage and or discharge, and so it becomes very integral to their sustainable plans. So sustainability in mining means, with respect to water, means sustainable water plans, and in general terms, about half of miners' issues are not enough water. I think that's the one that most people think about, but equally too much water. And in rough terms, it's a split between northern and southern hemispheres. Northern hemisphere mines tend to have too much water, and so there's issues in managing discharge, and that's equally sustainability risk. Southern hemisphere mines tend to be not enough water to perform operations, and so the cost of water to a miner is measured not by dollars per cubic meter, but revenue dollars related to the commodity that he's producing. I'll give you one very brief example and then move on. I'm involved at Anglo. We have 49 currently operating global mines and about 40 other closed mines. One copper mine alone generates in excess of $5 billion in annual revenue, and it lost water 2 years ago for 6 months. That was $2 billion in profit and about $3 billion in revenue. So the impact of water is dramatic in sustainable planning.
For Majis Industrial Services, we are serving the port of Sohar and the free zone at the moment in time. And in our area, of course, there is lack of groundwater. The water is stressful. So the only way to get the water is actually to desalinate it from the sea. And desalinating water through reverse osmosis is expensive. The same if we go for the heat technology is also the same issue. So really, it's a challenge. But on the other side, we are recycling the water. So Majis now, using the desalination of the seawater, recycling of the effluent, and produce useful water from that and send it back to our industry, as well as we are exploring all the potential opportunities of becoming innovative thinking. That means a better way to produce water. So are we going to see a reverse osmosis plant in the future that produces water from the sea at $1 instead of $2 or $3 at this moment? That's what we are looking for to move forward, actually.
Well, as you mentioned in your introduction, Jonathan, I'm kind of looking at this from the other side of the glass as a technology provider to industry, and I can speak a little bit about this change we've seen over the last decade in industrial water and sustainability. We're at the IDA conference, and a lot of the discussion is mostly about municipal infrastructure, and municipal infrastructure is meeting a need for solving water issues for the general population, and as time goes on, that gets integrated with things like the SDG Sustainable Development Goals, and that becomes an issue. But one thing that you really have to understand on industry is sustainability has two sides to it. And one side is, and first and foremost, it's sustainability of operations. And I think Hugh gave the greatest example of the perfect example about the way industry looks at sustainability is I'm a for-profit organization, and everything is going to be linked not to my cost of water, but to how water is impacting my product. Now, if that can be meshed in and melded into how we think of sustainability, environmental sustainability, energy sustainability, that's great, but my point is there has to be an economic equation around the whole thing. It's got to be economical to be sustainable for industry. So with that being said, what we've seen is that merger is becoming more and more acute year after year. 20, 30 years ago, we didn't see much of that. Water is a very local issue. If there's water scarcity, we need to desalinate water. If there's not water scarcity, we don't need to. But now, virtually in every region, if you don't have water scarcity, you have other risks. You have environmental risks. You have brand risks. For a consumer products company, their customers, especially the new generation, the social media generation, they care what a food and beverage company is doing with their water resources, and it makes a difference, and they found that they can show a link to the bottom line with what they're doing with their water. So water is quickly becoming a boardroom issue at industries around the world for various reasons, and it's very exciting because of that.
Thank you. So the triple bottom line type of valuation concepts, right? So kind of expanding on this a little bit more, Devish, thank you for teeing that up. So what are the other drivers you see out there and the goals that are driving you towards your, in some instances here, you're going to have corporate goals for sustainability targets. Some of the mining companies definitely do. So I'm curious to see, Saudi Aramco, do they have set goals? You from the mining sector, Majis, what are you seeing out there?
So basically it is the main driver, it is the pressure that the water sustainability issues is putting in oil and gas business. So the company have been established a water strategy. This water strategy consists of 4 main pillars. These pillars is identify the most sustainable water source. Second is to optimize the water demand. Third is to reuse all the available wastewater that you generate from your operation. Third, minimize the leaks and water losses, or fourth, I mean. So these 4 pillars, it is putting the company in a way that they can drive their operation and business. In order to achieve these goals, we have to identify certain governance. So in order to limit your options to the sustainable water source and encourage each operating facility to optimize their water demand. And putting a goals and target by this strategy and identify a water conservation roadmap. So each organization is mandatory to identify a roadmap to reach the identified goals. This is the way we do it in our company.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, let me speak to Anglo American's sustainability plan and then goals, and then maybe a bit to the industry, because they're similar, although I believe ours are a little more aggressive. We'd like to try to be the leader. With respect to the water metrics for sustainability, they're publicly available, and they're measured each year. The first one is a 50% reduction in freshwater abstraction by 2025. That's off a 2015 baseline. That's dramatic, by the way. We're at about 20% of that now, on the way to 50%. A second is a net contribution of in excess of 100 million cubic meters per year of beneficial reuse. That's actually pretty significant. We're at about 30 million right now, moving toward 100 million annually. And a 20% reduction in water intensity. And the way we measure it is basically per commodity. So meaning 20% reduction in the amount of water consumed per producing copper or diamond or whatever it means. And how that's managed is fundamentally change in processes to essentially use less water. And there's one final one which is important internally, and that's to Devish's point, providing sufficient sustainable water for every operation to meet their mine plan, which isn't a minor feat in water-scarce regions. And that means developing ways to do that, whether it's desal or otherwise, and they have to be done. The mining industry has similar metrics, each company obviously a little different, but they're all fundamentally around those measures. It's either around, it's a sustainable water source or sources, it's minimizing freshwater abstraction, because in my industry, freshwater abstraction is an absolute key metric relative to communities in the region. Again, back to the competition issue. And then a final one I didn't mention, which is a bit unusual to the mining industry other than other industries, and that's no what are called level 3 or greater environmental incidences. Now that's a big one, because if you're familiar with mining, we have major issues with tailings ponds and discharge and or breakage and or there have been some catastrophic ones, failures in the past few years. So moving that to zero in the industry is a goal. And what that means with respect to water, it means getting all water off tailings dams. That's a major go forward for the industry over the next 10 years. That means a lot of water treatment, a lot of water recycle. So that's basically our strategy.
Yeah, with regards to Majis, we are looking at the operational cost, the operational side, and in our activities, the major component is electricity actually, because reverse osmosis uses quite a high amount of kilowatt hours. So we decided to go for renewable technology, and we just awarded a contract of 0.7 megawatt of solar PV system, and with the aim that to award another 0.6 megawatt in the near future, that to reduce the electricity consumption instead from the grid, it will be solar. The other side, we just awarded the rapid gravity filtration units before entering into the RO plant. That will reduce the consumption of electricity at our RO plant. Currently, if it uses around 4.5 to 4 kilowatt, after installation of rapid gravity filtration, it will go down to 3.5. So that is reducing the component of electricity as well as chemicals, as well as the maintenance side. On the other side also, we are, as I mentioned, that we are doing recycling the effluent. So all the waste which comes from the industry, we treat it, recycle it, reverse osmose it, and we send it back to them for the industrial use. So this is the initiatives of Majis. In addition to that, we got the water going back to the sea as a cooling water, about 400,000 meter cube per hour. It's a big river. Currently, we are piloting a hydropower of 5 kilowatt turbine, but we aim to get around 2.7 megawatt from the hydropower itself. So that's a combination of a number of initiatives to reduce the operating cost, as well as, of course, protecting the environment.
Thank you so much. So Devish.
Yeah, so I think our panelists kind of identified for their specific companies very good examples of different sustainability goals. And that's what we're seeing with virtually every industry we're working with, that maybe 5-10 years ago they didn't have any, and now they're well articulated, strategic plan related, probably linked to their strategic plan related goals, and they're all rooted in carbon footprint, energy footprint reduction, and water footprint reduction. Mm-hmm. Now, we'll probably now get into this, but sometimes the two don't meet. And to reduce water footprint, you have to recycle more, you may have to go to zero discharge. That doesn't necessarily agree with the desire to have an energy footprint reduction. And this is the unique challenge for industry, is how to do both effectively. And one of the greatest ways is to really take a holistic view of their water operations. And even before you get into technology and treatment, you start getting into what we call, it's a three-step process. First, reduce. How can we reduce consumption? How can we look at the manufacturing processes and utilize less water? Okay, so reduce, then reuse, and recycle.
Yep.
So these are some of the trends we're seeing with industry today and some of the things we're trying to help our clients with.
Excellent. I wonder if there's another area we could just touch on there with achieving the sustainability goals. So there's the business drivers, the fundamental economics, and trying to strike the balance, as you said, Devish, with, we need to get to zero liquid discharge, but actually drives our energy costs up. But outside of the internal company dynamics and the industry dynamics, what else do you see out there? And certainly the mining sector in particular, Hugh, interested in your thoughts on the whole corporate social responsibility and other pressures from external advocacy groups, etc., and how they may be influencing your strategies as towards energy and water.
Yeah, just as a comment on that, we see the so-called triple bottom line. Historically, I would have spent my time talking inwardly to our mining operations. Today, I spend half my time with shareholders or investors, and their interest is, after safety, is energy and water. It's really safety, water, energy. And there is a premium in the share price related to sustainability plans. In fact, it is truly triple bottom line, along with a financial statement, a report. We have to report global sustainability reporting, and it's very formal. Global GRI 303, Global Reporting Initiative 303, CDP, WDP, all those things go into shareholder pricing of our stock and our industry stock. And routinely in investor meetings, those are the questions we get asked. It's less even about operational financing. It's about risk management with respect to water and energy.
Okay, thank you.
So from our side, we did something unique, which is assigning a dollar value for each cubic meter of water, regardless with the source, if it is groundwater or seawater or wastewater reuse, in order to encourage the economical value of the project to go toward the cheapest option. So if it is groundwater, it is equivalent to the treated seawater, desalinated seawater, transported to the point of use. So you can drill the well here, however, it's equivalent to the cost from the shoreline. So to give it some expensive weight in order to find another cheaper source. This is one thing. The second thing, we assign 3 KPIs. If you cannot gauge your performance, you cannot achieve your goal. So we identify 3 key performance indicators. The first one, it's the water sustainability, which is the total water used over, or the denominator, it is the total water used, including non-sustainable sources. So our target to be 100%. The second KPI, it is the water intensity, which is how much quantity, cubic meter of water that you need to produce one commodity. If it is oil, if it is gas, if it is biochemical, any product that you are manufacturing, to gauge the performance of each plant from our facility. The third one, this is the one we encourage all the time. It is the wastewater percentage of reuse, which is the reuse quantity over the generated wastewater. So by that, it is by performance driving equal the dollar value for each cubic meter.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
From me? Well, it's we built up a culture at the company for a long time now through the mission of the company, which says that we supply our customers sustainable, eco-friendly water solutions. Once that culture is embedded, then every member of the company realizes that. and try to contribute to the saving of the environment as well as sustainability. For example, the design of our plants is embedded in there. Like, for example, the lighting of the plant is LED with with low energy consumption side. So really, we look at every aspect to reduce the consumption of energy, be more efficient. Our water losses at this moment in time is below 7% as McGee's. And we do activities to save the environment in a number of ways, like planting trees and reducing the carbon footprint. And these, all of them add together because the culture is embedded there in the company.
Thank you. So I think I'll move on to the next question, if that's okay for the panel here. So I think you've alluded to this, and you've mentioned how you've been progressing against targets. Certainly you have, Hugh, and you've made some great progress there at Anglo American and also FAMA and Ahmed. But what are the challenges and barriers that you see in achieving your sustainability efforts? What are the current barriers there, and what can partners in the industry like ourselves, like solution providers, work with you to overcome those?
Is that for me?
Everybody.
Whoever wants to go first,
okay,
take it.
Sorry. The barriers actually for McGee's is that technology is one issue, that we need to advance on the technology. And that's the technology providers, like research and development, needs a lot of activities to be done on that ground. Still, reverse osmosis cost is high. The other thing that industrialists are challenging, they come up with different type of effluents. And these effluents are not standard, they are different types. So we need to find ways how to treat each effluent on its own. So these are the major challenges I see in front of us.
Okay. We identified three major challenges. The first one is the monitoring. So in order to achieve your goals, you have to have a proper monitoring system for your water system. The second thing is the old water network. It is having a lot of leaks, water losses, and it costs the company a lot of money to replace all of these network once a time. So we have to do them in phases. However, the old network, it does some limitation in our goals. The third one, it is the resistant to change. Everybody seeing that the water is available, it's not cost me anything, I can open the valve anytime and close it anytime. So we have to raise the awarenesses of our management and our operators, tell them the water is very costly for the company, for the nation, to bring it from the source to you, to give it some weight. And we are utilizing all available platform to raise this awarenesses. As you know, all of you, that we are heading now for the fourth industrial revolution, which is the digitalization of all your process. That's another challenge that we are facing, to link the water treatment system in the fourth industrial revolution.
Thank you.
So mining specifically, I would say the challenges are as follows, the top 3 or 4. The first one is, it's not technical, it's political. It's the recognition of governments and regions to essentially catch up to where they need to catch up to provide facilitated permitting, provide the ability to look at ecosystems beyond the mine and look at the region, look at the entire basin, for example, and the mine within that. That's difficult. Miners may want to do some project but don't have the ability to do it because the government doesn't allow it, or permitting maybe 5 years, those kind of things. That's a real problem. The second challenge is vision. And as an example, it makes no sense for a miner in Chile to build one desalination plant when his 2 neighbors 30 kilometers away are also have to do it, and you really should be doing a regional project. And those are opportunities that are now occurring, and I think so vision is probably the second challenge, but it's going to be the next opportunity. And the third is a technical one, which is the move to resource recovery, the move to recover, in my case, our case, metals from wastewaters, because of the need to treat wastewaters and recover them. Historically wasn't a major activity, but it is. It's moving because of the need to recycle, reuse, and or direct discharge and reuse water for beneficial reuse to recover those metals. So that requires technology development. So those are probably the large three in the particular mining industry.
Yeah, Jonathan, I'm going to, again, speak a little bit general here, but, you know, I'll just, to give you an example, I was at a conference in June where I met a lot of industrial end users, and I got a very similar statement independently from everybody I had a conversation with about recycling of water. And they said, we have sustainability goals. They're corporate-wide, but let me tell you the best, worst-kept secret. We're going to recycle as much as the economics will allow us to. So the biggest challenge in increasing the sustainability in industrial water is meeting the economics. And to me, there's three ways to attack that. First and foremost is really technology, you know. So Hugh brought it up as well, is that the more you recycle, what do you do with the waste? The cost of the waste. You know, I hate to say it because one of my biggest product lines is zero liquid discharge, but that has a cost to it. So you know, we have researchers, everybody in the industry is researching how to bring down the cost, you know, make higher recovery more economical. You see membranes that have a higher threshold of osmotic pressure now. So everything in this industry is about bringing the energy costs down, bringing the recovery up. And then if you can add the resource recovery piece that Hugh mentioned, you can start making more and more recycling, and we can get to that 99.9% recycling goal that everybody wants to have, but the economics need to match it. And there's, you know, we're in a golden age of technology in the industry, you know, so, you know, I heard the chairman of PUB this morning talk about biomimicry membranes, very passionate about how this is mimicking, you know, fish and mangroves and everything. So there's so many different technologies out there to reach this goal of making higher recycling, recovering energy, recovering metals, recovering minerals from solid waste, and that's what's going to move the economics. The other two are really the value of water. I think Tamer mentioned a wonderful, very progressive mindset of Aramco to actually put a right value on the water, because that's going to drive the water projects. And we've seen more and more of that, but not enough of either the industry, the company putting their own value of the water, like Aramco, or the government actually not subsidizing the water and charging the true cost of water, which would drive more reuse. And then when you have those two, I think one of the other biggest areas you can notch it up under mindset, I like to say business model. These are very highly technical challenges, and to address them, some of the companies out there in the industry, the end users, do have the wherewithal, do have the technical capability to do so, but most of them don't. These are very, very high technology solutions, very difficult to operate, and I actually think Magis is a great example of a focused utility, and they're outsourcing desalination, they're outsourcing wastewater treatment, and they're experts. Their business is water. They're not a division of a company that's creating something else, so they can create that as their core competence. So it's what I like to call industrial outsourcing, and I think that business model is going to grow as these challenges become more and more difficult.
So that's an excellent segue into the next question, perhaps for Hugh and for Tamer. And maybe Ahmed, you'll like this question. I mean, do you see this as a growing trend in your industry? To really, the water and the energy are really non-core businesses. Your business is mineral extraction, creating chemicals or what have you. Certainly, we're starting to see that in AECOM in North America, where some industries are saying, you know, meeting permit discharge consents and producing reliable water, you know, it's getting a little complex from where it used to be, and we need specialists in here to run this infrastructure. So I'm just curious, are you seeing those sort of trends in your industry sectors, and do you see any particular parts in the world where that could be more progressive, perhaps? Do you like that question?
So, as you stated earlier, you know, water is very essential for industry. So, and we are living in a very harsh environment. So the availability of the water source is very limited to just seawater, deep groundwater. So we don't have very deep groundwater, and wastewater reuse that we have. The trend now, for example, in our operation, we try to think out of the box. Like we are planning to use some CO2 injection in order to use the water for mining, using certain technology of gas and gel. So we identified too many technologies. However, we are looking for our neighbors and GCC countries to share best practices that they have been done and that we can share. I think we have to identify a platform for knowledge sharing. We are utilizing like these conferences and Water Arabia conferences that we are doing in Saudi Arabia. However, it's not enough to build a network and sharing proper knowledge. I think we do certain good operation in our industrial facilities that we are willing to share with our neighbor companies for oil and gas business. And I think they do the same. They have something they identify, they face challenges, they offer some issues that we can benefit out of. So best practices and knowledge sharing is essential in this case.
Okay, you see it staying core to Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Hugh?
So a couple of just fundamentals in the mining industry. Someone had said to me not that long ago that mining had matured and it was tailing downward, and it's actually the opposite. The industry in terms of tonnage is going to triple in the next 10 years. And it's going to triple because of the drive, one, the growth in population, and two, the move to electronic-based materials. So electric batteries alone, just to take a commodity, copper, which has been around forever, in less than 10 years, the amount of available copper is going to be 1/3 of the world's requirement. That's why we're seeing right now $30 billion in new copper mines this year. We just opened two at $16 billion. That's why Rio is expanding in Afghanistan and Mongolia. It's why we're doing Peru and Chile. That's why. Cobalt, 1/10 of the world's capacity or need. Chromium, you can get down the list. If you take your iPhone, it's got 31 metals. 4 of those are rare earths, of which are found only in China. The other statistic I would offer, so we're seeing a growth rate in excess of 25% annually in total mining. Coal mining is down, but the rest of mining is generally up. Related to that, the interesting part is that the statistic with respect to utilities, water and energy, water requirements in mining and CapEx projects is currently at about 15% of total CapEx. It's going to go to 25 to 30% of total CapEx. Energy is another 10 to 12% of total CapEx. It's $15 to $20 billion a year, going up at 25%. The problem with that, even on top of that, is that the next set of mines are all in water-scarce area. 80% of new mines over the next 10 years are in water-scarce areas. So I have people would say God had a sense of humor. He put the things we want in places you can't get to them, and it has no water. And so to address the question, so both water and energy are actually becoming more of a problem than a less of a problem for us as an industry.
Yeah. We at McGee's, we actually water solutions focused, and we have 5 products, water solutions for our industrial customers at the Port of Sohar and Free Zone. One of these products is the potable water, which is regulated. The rest are not regulated. We discuss it with our potential customers. We see how we tariffed it. We sell it to them. The regulated product, which is potable water, is cost-reflected tariff. So since January 2015 up to now, the company did not receive any single real as a subsidy from the government. This company is standalone, profit-making company. We always advise our potential customers, industrialists, that do not focus on the auxiliaries, the water. If you are manufacturing something else, leave the water to us. Let us discuss it. And if it is potentially to negotiate, let us negotiate, because it's not regulated. But the one which is regulated is difficult to negotiate because it's set by the regulator. The tariff is known. And the tariff does not have subsidy. It's cost-reflected tariff. So we always say to our customers, take care of your core business and give us our core business. Our core business is water, and we try to help you as much as we can. Also, we are looking into the bioproduct of that water. For example, the effluent itself. We produce water out of it, useful water. We send it back to the customers. Currently, we are looking into the solid waste, which comes with that effluent, and we see if we can extract energy out of it. We are working on a project like that. If we get high level of ammonia, we recover that ammonia, we try to sell it. If we get oil from the refinery, we extract that oil, we try to sell it. And if my colleague says here, copper, potentially there, we will look at that. So whatever bioproduct we can do, we will get it, and then that will compensate the cost and, of course, generating revenue for the company.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, so we're seeing it's a very local issue specific on either the industry or the region or just the culture of the country. You'll see a lot in the Middle East that the water is so scarce, it's considered fundamental, and therefore some companies do not want to outsource. But you also see in the Middle East great examples of IWPPs in the sector, and also now the trailblazing of somebody like Majis, who's an industrial utility, and you see it also in Saudi Arabia with Marafiq and things of that nature. So I can move away to the other side of the world where you see the dichotomy within the oil and gas industry, where generally oil and gas industry is very, particularly in upstream where water is produced water could be recycled and used for floods. They're going to say, I'm not outsourcing this. This is very critical for my operation, and I'm going to hold on to it. But in the unconventional oil and gas industry, where they're fracking and they're using a lot of water, they're creating a lot of produced water, the whole culture of the industry is outsourcing to the point where they won't even give you a contract. It's all merchant risk that providers bring in, set up mobile units, process the water at a per barrel rate, and take all of the risks. So it's really a variety of things you see around, and it's very much a mixed bag. But I do believe that as the economics correct themselves and start driving things, and the solutions become more and more challenging, the move will be more and more to outsource water.
Okay. Thank you so much. Now, I know we started a little later and conscious of time here, so I think at this point, I'd like to open it up for the audience here if they'd like to ask any of our panel members some questions on this topic. Would anyone like to ask our panel question at this point? Yeah, Mike. Someone get a microphone to Mike.
Mike Dixon from Sonorta. I did a voice of customer survey in the oil and gas industrial water market recently, and I talked to them about treatment solutions. And bear in mind, this is in hydraulic fracturing that I did this. And the response to the question, would you use other treatment solutions and what would you use, was usually, hey, you know, we'd do a little bit of basic biocide kind of stuff. We prefer to use chemical to do that, not ozonation or anything like that. But anything to do with like on the salt removal side, or anything a little bit more fancy, even when you hang a price tag on it and say, listen, you could save $1 million per well here, the response was usually, thanks, but no thanks, Mike. We'd prefer to do the most basic thing possible, and we're not really interested in the $1 million. You know, we're already making billions of dollars, so not so concerned about a few million. In the mining space, how do you feel about that kind of reaction? Are you on the other side of that and saying, no, we would really like to see, even if it's a small dollar amount, because of the environmental attachment to it as well? So I guess the question's for Hubert and Devesh. You do a lot of work in oil and gas. Have you seen similar reactions in that space?
And I will answer it.
Go ahead. Yeah.
All right, I'll give you a response from the mining side. The fundamental drive when evaluating optionality and how to address a need is generally risk-based rather than finances, if I can put it that way. And by that I mean, I wouldn't say that a few $1 million is minor, it's not. Having said that, it has to be in a risk profile that says, if I can use chemicals and do something and it's a little more expensive and I know it and it doesn't affect, and if I know it's not going to affect my sustainable operations, then you'll do it, versus something that may have a better benefit downstream but requires the risk of new technology demonstration. I don't want to say that you don't want to look at new technology, but that is a trade-off, and that's always a discussion, right? So my own view is that mining is a little more interested in technology because if the benefit is great. If the benefit is only incremental, it's a difficult putt.
So it helps when you're saying you can recover more metal, and like the volumes are probably more than a couple of $1 million if you're saying particularly copper, right? So we can recover more copper with this new technology, then the risk profile changes a little bit.
The risk profile completely changes in that case, because there's a major drive to recovery right now, and there will be for the next foreseeable future. And so any incremental recovery has multiplying effects, not only just the dollar value, if you will, but also the sustainability value of not putting toxic materials into the environment. So absolutely, that's a major driver.
Okay, in our company, we have a systematic way to evaluate these ideas. We divide them in 3 categories: either best practices, or new technologies, or a new technique. Then when we capture it, we send it to the Central Engineering for evaluation, and they have to present it within a week or a couple of weeks maximum to the committee, including the applicability for our operation. During this committee meeting, they identified all the positive and negative aspects from this category, and if it is worth $1 million, they will implement it immediately, if it is no risk issues associated with it. So we try to systematic in a way to eliminate human error and not fall in the crack and forget about these ideas.
So I'm glad Tamer jumped in before I did, because that was, he just illustrated the point I wanted to make to you. In your voice of customer surveys, I'd be willing to wager that the guys who said, well, even if it helps me save $1 million, I'm not interested in it, would be more of a very small, fast-moving oil and gas wildcatter developer type, whereas it's an evolution is that the developers come up, do this, they're very low capex, they're very unsystematic, but then as the industry evolves and moves to the majors like the Chevrons, the Conocos, the Ramcos, I couldn't say it any better than Tamer did, is there's a systematic approach, there's a review, everything is driven by economics, and the reason you wouldn't see that in mining is there's not many small mining companies out there. It takes a little bit to, you know, to set up a mine, and therefore these are usually organizations that have very disciplined economic approaches to things versus kind of more of a wildcatter mentality.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point on the wildcat front. It's like I mentioned, it was in hydraulic fracturing, right? And they're still coming up to being more mature in the market and having that approach of let's look at it together and collaborate and find something that, find innovations that we can use together. So good point. And I think Tamer made some really good points that are a segue to the next panel on innovation as well. So hopefully you stick around.
Well, thanks for the question, Mike. Anyone else in the audience have a question for the panel? We've probably got time for one more question.
Just I have minor comment to the
Absolutely,
gentleman.
please.
Just because you are here, technology providers probably, and research and developers, I don't want you to give up. Challenge is there from our customers. We are the service providers, you are the technology providers. And between us, we continue the dialogue until all parties agree. Indeed, it's the ultimate side is the economy, how much is going to cost the solution, but never to give up in providing a solution. That's my message to you all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tamer, you wanted to make just a couple of quick points,
Yes.
and then I'd like to close the session.
Yes. First of all, I want to invite you all for Water Arabia that will take place in Saudi Arabia, Khobar, in February 2020. It is a very excellent platform for knowledge sharing in water treatment, wastewater, and groundwater as well. It has 3 workshops. It's very wide conference for water business. The second, for all industrial or manufacturing, we face in the company that after sales services is not that as promised when we try to secure or signing an agreement. So you have to put some focus in the after sales services to introduce you to the next contract or project. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'd like to close this session now. I'd just like to thank our panel so much for sharing their experience with us, the journey that they're on towards sustainability. I think you can hear from the proof statements that were made, there's a lot of progress we made in this area, and yet a lot of also development further to go as technology improves. And I'm surprised, Mike, you didn't ask about machine learning's involvement here, but that would probably take us another hour. So thank you so much. Thank you to the audience too for staying with us, and
Thank you.
We'll get ready for the next session.